Good morning. It is 8:38 on the Finger Lakes Morning News. I'm Steve Penstone. Auburn Public Theater has a big event coming up next month, and it's actually going to be held at Auburn High School. And it is as part of their annual speakers series. It's going to be held on April the 27th. And the guest will be Chris Herren, former NBA basketball player who is now a motivational speaker, author, and most importantly, a sobriety advocate. Chris, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
Well, your story is a story that unfortunately I guess is all familiar to those of us who have played sports and are fans of sports. You came out of Durfee High School in Massachusetts, had a great high school career, McDonald All-American, Massachusetts Player of the Year by the Boston Globe 3 years in a row, Gatorade New England Player of the Year 2 years. He went on to play at Boston College and Cal State Fresno, and then second-round pick in the NBA draft, played for the Nuggets, the Celtics, and then all over Europe and Asia. Where did things start to go sideways for you?
I mean, looking back, I think things went sideways when I started drinking as a 13, 14-year-old. I mean, I was that kid that grew up in that culture where, teenage drinking in high school was accepted and often, adults acknowledged it and looked away from it. So I think right there speaks volumes that, at 14 years old, I was drinking and smoking marijuana, and that was the beginning. I think when it comes to addiction, I think we put so much focus on the end and we forget the beginning. I think, to be honest with you, when it comes to prevention, I do around 200 high schools a year. I think kids expect a speaker to come in and tell this horrific story about how bad it is when it ends, instead of talk about what it was like in the beginning. And I think the beginning is just as important.
You're absolutely right. And growing up in the 70s playing hockey in Canada, I had a number of friends that had promising futures ahead of them. A couple of them were touted as potential NHLers, and as you say, it was the same thing. Teenage drinking, especially when they lowered the drinking age to 18. I mean, that just opened a whole Pandora's box. But when did the alcohol start to turn to drugs, and what impact? Obviously, that had an impact on your NBA and your basketball career overall.
Yeah, I mean, it had an impact on me right away. At 18 years old, when I was a freshman in college, I was suspended and ultimately lost my scholarship due to failed drug tests my freshman year at Boston College. At 18 years old, I was introduced to cocaine, and that one door, that one introduction, lasted for 14 years. And so it was a problem from the beginning. But as I got older, the problem got greater, and there were more consequences, and it had a profound effect on my college career, and then transferred over into my my NBA career, my professional career. At 18, it was cocaine, and by 21, it was OxyContin. And, by the age of 23, I was shooting heroin daily. So, drugs have been a part of my story. They were basically parallel with my basketball career right from the very beginning.
You've been drug and alcohol free since August of 2008. What was it that made you turn the corner and realize that you needed the help?
I was 32 years old. My son, Christopher, was 9, and my daughter was 6. My wife was pregnant with our third child, and I was found overdosed on the side of the road for the 4th time. So, I went to treatment. I was given a gift, and I went to a treatment center in New York, and I've been blessed to carry that gift for the last 8.5 years, one day at a time.
And really, I guess, in all honesty, you were lucky to even survive. And a year after you realized that you needed the help, you decided to take the next step by becoming a motivational speaker.
I did, and it happened by accident, really. Initially I got a phone call to come in to speak to a few kids in a classroom, and a few kids in the classroom have turned into over 1 million kids over the last 6 years. But it's been extremely rewarding. Often, depressing, but absolutely inspiring at times. Kids need a chance to tell their story, and I don't think we give them enough. I don't think we surround our kids with enough education. I don't think we surround them with enough prevention and enough opportunity to talk about who they are and the kid that they're struggling with. Every day I walk into a high school or a college and I'll receive emails from kids telling me their story. And, our kids should have been able to tell that story many times before I walked into their high school.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's even more so now. I think with the explosion of the heroin and opioid epidemic across the country and even around the world. I mean, here in the Finger Lakes area, it has just been devastating, the number of young people and good young people that have been dying through heroin overdose, and now it's fentanyl and plus the other opioids as well.
Every community is struggling with the opioid crisis. I mean, everywhere I go, from California to Texas to New England to the Midwest, everybody is struggling with this heroin issue. The thing about it is we're losing a lot of lives, but we're hurting a lot of families. And, there's a lot of broken, fractured families because of this epidemic. But I think if we want to get out in front of it and we want to be better at preventing it, we have to start with our kids. We have to create a curriculum around wellness right from the very beginning.
And that is the basis for the Herren Project, and you're coming to Auburn to talk about it here, where, like I said, so many young people have passed away due to overdoses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's many times, sharing my story. I walk in and I want people to be inspired to share theirs. And I think once someone is willing or able to share a little bit about themselves, they're at a point in their life where they're willing to overcome it or get help for it. And if I can share my story, my struggle, what I went through, I think it's a testament to, working hard in a life of recovery and sobriety. And tomorrow is possible, and tomorrow can be a much better day. And, heroin doesn't have to be a death sentence.
Yeah, certainly that is the hope. And we're talking with former NBAer Chris Herren, who will be speaking at Auburn High School on April 27th as part of Auburn Public Theater's annual Speakers Series. And Chris, I got to ask you, I'm a former police officer and left the job basically because I was burned out by what I was seeing. Do you ever get to the point where you just want to say, I've had enough and can't go on and do this anymore because of the sadness and the stories that you hear?
Yeah. I mean, you definitely have those days. I mean, I often say police officers, I think, and EMTs have it the worst because they see the worst moment. Especially when it comes to drug addicts and people suffering from this illness. I mean, I had a few run-ins with law enforcement, obviously, because of my overdoses, and nobody was ever nicer to me than the police officers when they found me. To see somebody in that condition and help them, come back to life with Narcan or talk to them on the way to the hospital. I think all those low moments in my life, have become blessings. And I remember every single one of them because I believe they were instrumental in my story and turning my life around. But, when you hear others who struggle, it's just you find gratitude for what you have. And, you try your best to extend yourself to give them the gift that I've been given. And I think that's important. I think we have to stop being silent around this. I think there's a lot of people that get sober and want to forget it. I'm not afraid to talk about it and remember it and share it. So it is a burden at times, but it's also a blessing, and I'm grateful that I'm part of it. So.
You mentioned right off the top that you started drinking as a teenager, and you were a star basketball player. Do you think part of the problem, and I reflect on my days as a wannabe jock, the entitlement that star athletes get at the high school level might be a major factor? I know there was an incident here at a local high school recently where there was a large house party, and there were charges laid and everything else. That certainly has been the case in a lot of situations, and leads to where you went, the road you went down.
I think you can call it entitlement, but I think there's a lot of insecurity behind that entitlement. And I often say that to kids. Nobody, not many people achieved what I achieved in high school, and I had reached the pinnacle of a high school basketball career. To be named to the McDonald's All-American team, to play in all the elite camps and score thousands of points and so on and so forth. But I couldn't even walk into a house party without getting drunk. I couldn't stand in a room amongst my peers and classmates unless I was under the influence. And, people can call that entitlement. I call it insecurity.
That's a good way of putting it. It's going to be an inspirational evening, April 27th, 7 o'clock at Auburn High School. The tickets are $25 and available at the Auburn Public Theater. And a portion of the proceeds from the event will go to the Auburn Public Studio Educational Scholarship Fund. Chris Herren, congratulations on your sobriety and how you're paying back and paying forward. And we'll look forward to seeing you here in Auburn next month.
Thanks for having me on. I look forward to coming. So
Continue good health and success.
You as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Chris Herren, former NBA player with a story to tell, and we'll have all the information posted at fingerlakesdailynews.com.